Chapter 3. Having reached the mouth of the river Platte, our voyagers encamped for 3 days, during which they were busily occupied in drying and airing their goods and provisions, making new oars and poles and repairing their birch canoe, which had sustained material injury. The hunters brought in an abundance of game, with which the boats were loaded to repletion. Deer were had for the asking, and turkeys and fat grouse were met with in great plenty. The party, moreover, regaled on several species of fish, and at a short distance from the river banks, found an exquisite kind of wild grape. No Indians had been seen for better than a fortnight, as this was a hunting season, and they were doubtless engaged in the prairies, taking buffalo. After perfectly recruiting, the voyagers broke up their encampment and pushed on up the Missouri. We resume the words of the journal. August 14th. We started with a delightful breeze from the southeast and kept along by the southern shore, taking advantage of the eddy and going at a great rate, notwithstanding the current, which in the middle was an unusually full and strong. At noon, we stopped to examine some remarkable mounds on the southwestern shore, at a spot where the ground seems to have sunk considerably to an extent of 300 acres or more. A large pond is in the vicinity and appears to have drained the low track. This is covered with mounds of various sizes and shapes, all formed of sand and mud, the highest being nearest the river. I could not make up my mind whether these hillocks were of natural or artificial construction. I should have supposed them made by the Indians, but for the general appearance of the soil, which had apparently been subjected to the violent action of water. Editor's footnote. These mounds are now well understood to indicate the position of the ancient village of the Ottos, who were once a very powerful tribe. Being reduced by continual hostilities, they sought protection of the Pawnees and migrated south of the Platte, about 30 miles from its mouth. We stayed at this spot for the rest of the day, having made altogether 20 miles. August 15th. Today we had a heavy, disagreeable headwind and made only 15 miles with great labor, encamping at night beneath a bluff on the north shore, this being the first bluff on that side which we had seen since leaving the Nottoway River. In the night it came on to rain in torrents, and the Greeleys brought in their horses and ensconced themselves in the cabin. Robert swam the river with his horse from the south shore, and then took the canoe across from Meredith. He appeared to think nothing of either of these feats, although the night was one of the darkest and most boisterous I ever saw, and the river was much swollen. We all sat in the cabin very comfortably, for the weather was quite cool, and were kept awake for a long time by the anecdotes of Thornton. We told story after story of his adventures with the Indians on the Mississippi. His huge dog appeared to listen with profound attention to every word that was said. Whenever any particularly incredible circumstance was related, Thornton would gravely refer to him as a witness. "Nep," he would say, "don't you remember that time?" Or, "Nep, can you swear to the truth of that? Can't you, Nep?" When the animal would roll up his eyes, immediately loll out his monstrous tongue and wag out his great head up and down, as much to say, "Oh, it is every bit as true as the Bible." Although we had all knew this trick had been taught the dog, yet for our lives we could not forbear shouting with laughter whenever Thornton would appeal to him. August 16th. Early this morning, passed an island and a creek about 15 yards wide, and at a farther distance of 12 miles, a large island in the middle of the river. We had now generally high prairie and timbered hills on the north, with low ground in the south, covered with cottonwood. The river was excessively crooked, but not so rapid as before we passed the Platte. Altogether, there is less timber than formerly. What there is mostly elm, cottonwood, hickory, and walnut with some oak. Had a strong wind nearly all day, and by means of the eddy we'd made 25 miles before night. Our encampment was on the south, upon a large plain covered with high grass, and bearing a great number of plum trees and currant bushes. In our rear was a steep, woody ridge, ascending which we found another prairie, extending back for about a mile, and stopped again by a similar woody ridge, followed by another vast prairie, going off into the distance as far as the eye can reach. From the cliffs just above us, we had one of the most beautiful prospects in the world. Editor's footnote. The Council Bluffs. August 17th. We remained at the encampment all day and occupied ourselves in various employments, getting Thornton with his dog to accompany me. I strolled to some distance to the southward, and was enchanted with the voluptuous beauty of the country. The prairies exceeded in beauty anything told in the tale of the Arabian Nights. On the edges of the creeks there was a wild mass of flowers which looked more like art than nature, so profusely and fantastically were their vivid colors blended together. Their rich odor was almost oppressive. Every now and then we came to a kind of green island of trees, placed amid an ocean of purple, blue, orange, and crimson blossoms, all waving to and fro in the wind. These islands consisted of the most majestic forest oaks, and beneath them the grass resembled a robe with the softest green velvet, while up their huge stems there clambered generally a profusion of grapevines, laden with a delicious ripe fruit. The Missouri in the distance presented the most majestic appearance, and many of the real islands with which it was studded were entirely covered with plum bushes or other shrubbery, except where crossed in various directions by narrow, mazy paths, like the alleys of an English flower garden. And in these alleys we could always see either elks or antelopes, who had no doubt made them. We returned at sunset to the encampment, delighted with our excursion. The night was warm, and we were excessively annoyed by mosquitoes. August 18th. Today passed through a narrow part of the river, not more than 200 yards wide, with a rapid channel much obstructed with logs and driftwood. Ran the large boat on the Sawyer and half filled her with water before we could extricate her from the difficulty. We were obliged to halt in consequence and overhaul our things. Some of the biscuit was injured, but none of the powder. Remained all day, having only made 5 miles. August 19th. We started early this morning and made great headway. The weather was cool and cloudy, and at noon we had a drenching shower. Passed a creek on the south, the mouth of which is nearly concealed by a large sand island of singular appearance. Went about 15 miles beyond this. The highlands now recede from the river and are probably from 10 to 20 miles apart. On the north is a good deal of fine timber, but on the south very little. Near the river are beautiful prairies, and along the banks we procured 4 or 5 different species of grape, all of good flavor and quite ripe. One is a large purple grape of excellent quality. The hunters came into camp at night on both sides of the river and brought us more game than we could well know what to do with. Grouse, turkeys, 2 deer, an antelope, and a quantity of yellow birds with black striped wings. These latter proved delicious eating. We made about 20 miles during the day. August 20th. The river this morning was full of sandbars and other obstructions, but we were proceeded with spirit. and reached the mouth of a pretty large creek before night. At a distance of 20 miles from our last encampment, the creek comes in from the north and has a large island opposite its mouth. Here we made our camp with the resolution of remaining 4 or 5 days to trap beaver, as we saw great signs of them in the neighborhood. This island was one of the most varied-looking situations in the world, and filled with my mind with the most delightful and novel emotions. The whole scenery rather resembled what I had dreamed of when a boy than actual reality. The banks sloped down very gradually into the water and were carpeted with a short, soft grass of a brilliant green hue, which was visible under the surface of the stream for some distance from the shore, especially on the north side where the clear creek fell into the river. All around the island, which was probably about 20 acres in extent, was a complete fringe of cottonwood, the trunks loaded with grapevines in full fruit, and so closely interlocking with each other that we could scarcely get a glimpse of the river between the leaves. Within the circle, the grass was somewhat higher and of a coarser texture, with a pale yellow or white streak down the middle of each blade, and giving out a remarkably delicious perfume, resembling that of the vanilla bean, but much stronger, so that it had the whole atmosphere was loaded with it. The common English sweetgrass is of no doubt of the same genus, but greatly inferior in beauty and fragrance. Interspersed among it in every direction were myriads of the most beautiful, brilliant flowers in full bloom, and most of them of fine odor: blue, pure white, bright yellow, purple, crimson, gaudy scarlet, and some with streaked leaves like tulips. Little knots of cherry trees and plum bushes grew in various directions about, and there were many narrow, winding paths which circled by the island, and which had been made by the elks or antelopes. Nearly in the center was a spring of sweet and clear water, which bubbled up from among a cluster of steep rocks. Covered from head to foot with moss and flowering vines, the whole bore a wonderful resemblance to the artificial flower garden, but was more infinitely beautiful, looking rather like some of the scenes of enchantment which we read of in old books. We were all in ecstasy with the spot, and prepared our camp in the highest glee amid its wilderness of sweets. The party remained here a week, during which time the neighboring country of the north was explored in many directions, and some peltry obtained, especially upon the creek mentioned. The weather was fine, and the enjoyment of the voyagers suffered no alloy in their terrestrial paradise. Mr. Rodman, however, omitted necessary precautions, and sentries were regularly posted every night, when all hands assembled at camp and made merry. Such feasting and drinking were never known before, the Canadians proving themselves the very best fellows in the world at a song or even over a flagon. They did nothing but eat and cook and dance and shout French carols at the top of their voice. During the day they were chiefly entrusted with the charge of encampment, while the steadier members of the party were absent upon hunting or trapping expeditions. In one of these Mr. Rodman enjoyed an excellent opportunity of observing the habits of the beaver, and his account of the singular animal is highly interesting, the more so as it differs materially in some points from the ordinary descriptions. He was attended as usual by Thornton and his dog, and had traced up a small creek to the south to its source, and the Highlands about 10 miles from the river. The party came at length to a place where a large swamp had been made by beavers in damming up the creek. A thick grove of willows occupied them over one extremity of the swamp, some of them overhanging the water at a spot where several animals were observed.